Toothcake back with another Arma2 tutorial. It's time for the Advanced Combat Radio Environment, or ACRE mod. Those unfamiliar, this actually adds in a functioning radio system to Arma2 that does not rely on the local VON. It adds in things like terrain occlusion, degradation of the signal at range, and also a half duplex system. It's going to be a little basic here to start just because it's kind of meant to be an orientation towards the mod itself, but I will get into the individual radio interactions as we go on. In my opinion, ACRE is a huge step up from the voice over net system used as a default for communications in Arma2. Anybody who's used VON in a large multiplayer game knows that it can be kind of a pain to communicate with different elements, given that each voice channel really requires its own keybind in order to be used effectively. What ACRE does is automate a lot of the interactions that you would be using over the course of a mission. For example, if you jump into a vehicle, rather than having to switch to a vehicle channel in order to speak with the crew, ACRE will automatically localize the audio so that everybody in that vehicle can hear you. The automation that ACRE offers pretty much means that you're going to be using one key to communicate most of the time, and that's going to be your TeamSpeak push-to-talk key. The only time you'll really deviate from your push-to-talk key is when you're actually using the radios, and that's what we're going to get into next. Alright, I'm going to use the PRC343 as kind of a springboard to launch into my presentation about the different radios and also the keybinds that you will be using inside of ACRE. Excuse me. In ShackTech, we use the 343 for intra-squad communication, so communication for within the squad itself. That's a short-range handheld radio, so that's really the only thing that it's good for. Pretty much the bread and butter of ACRE, as far as keybinds go, is going to be the caps lock key. That is going to be your transmit. You notice in the lower right-hand corner, there's the transmitting prompt that comes up. Usually, you'll get an accompanying beep to let you know that you're transmitting. But I'm not connecting to AT Speaks 3 server at the moment. Excuse me. One of the things you might have noticed earlier is that I mentioned it's a half duplex system. So anybody familiar with how radios work, half duplex means that really only one person can be talking at a time. So if you're transmitting and somebody else is trying to transmit, nobody else will hear. Basically, the people will hear whoever was first in line. So when you're using ACRE in a populated server, it's very important to employ brevity. Second most important keybind is going to be left control, left shift X. It's going to bring up the GUI for whatever radio that you happen to be using. As mentioned, PRC343 is fairly simple, so we're limited to two knobs. On the left we've got the channel knob here, and on the right we've got the volume. It's just a simple left and right click in order to change those out as you want. Another bread and butter one, I'm just going to grab another radio here, is the 148. Now you have UHF and VHF. The difference between these, as far as I know, is pretty minimal. I could be wrong about that, but the operation of the radio is essentially the same. You'll notice we have two radios here. You can shift between them by hitting left control, left shift A. And you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner, again, it'll be reflect what radio that you are using. So same sort of deal as far as caps lock and everything to transmit. That's going to be carryover between what radio you're using. It's always going to be caps lock to transmit over the radio. Excuse me again. But the only thing that changes between the radios are the interface. So you'll notice with this one, it gets a little bit crazier as far as I'm going to be coughing all through this. What information is displayed. Now I know this looks kind of complicated. It's really not that bad. If you'll notice, we're starting here on the channel page. You just want to use the up and down arrows in order to change the channels. With the 148 here, it also is really the first small radio that introduces a power setting. So you just want to hit mode twice. So this screen, the power screen is displayed. You notice you'll see current and new. Now you just want to use the arrows to punch the power up, and then hit enter to apply it. Now you'll notice if you go back to the power screen, it's actually reflecting 5000. Now the power setting is pretty much as it sounds. The more power that you are supplying to the radio, the farther it can broadcast. Really, as far as radio operations, that is it. Those two concepts are going to carry through all of the radios that are present in ACRE. And just to kind of demonstrate that, go to one of the more complicated ones. And this was specifically the reason for this request. Was the 117 Foxtrot. I'm going to ground that. Once again, I'm just switching between the radios, and Control-Shift-X to bring that up. Okay, so this one looks super complicated, but it's actually fairly easy. You'll notice on the left here we've got the channel number, and then on the right in the center, we've got the frequency of the channel itself. All you got to do is hit the preset up and down in order to change channels. And then for the excuse me, in order to change the power, I believe it is programmed here. We're just going to hit enter to back up the channel, and then we'll be going to the menu selection here, and then you just want to click all the way through to power. So you'll notice that this one starts on 5000 itself. The 117 Foxtrot, it's actually a big boy radio, so it's meant to cover a wide variety of elements and also a very far range. This one actually, I think, can go all the way up to 20. Yeah, 20,000. So just set the power to that and hit enter. One of the cool things about the 117 Foxtrot is that it can talk both to a 119 and a 118. A 148 over the same radio. So you can communicate with a bunch of different elements without actually having to be on there, switch between the radio types. So that kind of demonstrates that it's the power and channel concepts are going to carry over to each of them. Just in the interest of thoroughness, I will go through each of the other radios and kind of demonstrate how to change channels and also how to raise the power settings. With the 119, since this is an older radio, it's you'll notice the interface is actually a little bit more archaic. You've got the 6 channels here, or the manual, which you should be able to... Oh, I guess they took manual out. Okay, 6 channels, which you can just left click in order to change through. Not sure what the different modes do, but the power button over here, you'll notice that you can switch between low, medium, high, and then the PA is actually a vehicle setting, so the output of the radio will be boosted by the, the vehicle, if you happen to be sitting in one. One thing to note about the 119 is that it can also talk to the 148. And lastly is the 152. I personally don't have much experience with this. If it's anything like its real-world equivalent, though, it's got support for the sync GARs, meaning that it can interface with the different types of radios. So I'm willing to bet that it can talk to the 148 and probably the 117 Foxtrot, if not the 119 as well. If you notice, same sort of deal with the channel presets. If you hit the preset button, it will change between the different channels. And as far as going between the different power settings, it's the output button here. And just like with the 117 Foxtrot, you're just moving between the different settings. So you just want to hit enter for power and set it to high. And that really covers it about with the radios. A couple of things just to close this out. You can actually choose which speaker you want the radio that you're using to broadcast through. So using left control, left shift, and then an arrow key, you can choose the left, right, or center. Bear in mind this is for individual for each radio. So let's say you've got a 343 and a 148. You want the 343 to broadcast over the left, so it's control shift left. And then you want the 148 to come over the center, so control shift up. Center in this case is going to be both speakers. There you go. And lastly, you can also mount vehicles and radios. And with this one, you just want to use the the ACRE interact, which is Alt Shift Q. And that'll bring up the menu. You just tab through the menu. You've got the option to mount the radio. If you go back to the radio again with Alt Shift Q, can turn the speaker on. So now if somebody broadcasts over that 148 and the proper channel, the transmission will actually be emanating from the Humvee itself. Not really sure what this would be used for, possibly for an artillery crew. Haven't had too much of a chance to play around with it myself, but somebody might find it useful. And that pretty much concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching, I hope you found it helpful.